It is a choice made every day: the comfort of home or the allure of the world. This is the story of a son who traded his inheritance for reckless freedom. A son who found himself starving in the silence, humiliated by the company of swine. But this is not a story of shame. It is the ultimate tale of boundless grace. It is the story of a father whose love is so relentless, so complete, that he watches the road every hour, ready to run to meet the lost and declare a resurrection. The lost is found. The dead is alive. Welcome to the parable of the prodigal son. In the sun-drenched hills of Judea lived a wealthy man with 2 sons. His life was blessed, his lands were rich, and his family, seemingly, was whole. The elder son was dutiful, dependable, and hard-working, a man who found his place in the daily rhythm of the farm. But the younger son was restless. His heart was not content with the quiet abundance of his home. It yearned for excitement, for independence, and for the distant world he had only heard whispers of. One day, the younger son approached his father with a shocking and painful demand. He said, "Father, give me the share of the estate that belongs to me." For a son to ask for his inheritance while his father was still alive was an act of profound disrespect, a terrible insult that essentially wished the father were dead. Yet, the father, bound by a deep and enduring love that transcended the slight, did not argue, he did not withhold. He simply divided his property between his 2 sons. It was only a short time later that the younger son liquidated everything. He gathered all his wealth, the accumulated legacy of his family, and set off. He traveled to a distant country, far from the watchful eyes and the moral constraints of his home. In that faraway land, the son found the freedom he craved, but he found no wisdom. He wasted his entire fortune recklessly on wild, self-indulgent living. He spent his money on fleeting pleasures and hollow friendships, burning through his inheritance until every last coin was gone. No sooner had his wealth vanished than a severe famine struck the land. His fair-weather friends disappeared, and the young man, suddenly penniless in a hostile country, found himself utterly destitute. To survive, he was forced to take the lowest, most humiliating job he could find. He hired himself out to a local citizen who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. For a young man raised in a devout household, this was the deepest possible degradation. He was so desperately hungry that he longed to eat the very pods the pigs were feeding on. No one offered him anything. He had abandoned his home for extravagance, only to find himself starving in the mire, spiritually and physically unclean. It was there, in the filth and the famine, that the son finally experienced a moment of true clarity. He began to think, to reason, and to remember. How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, he realized, and here I am starving to death. A sense of deep repentance washed over him. He knew he could never reclaim his position as a son, but he formed a desperate plan. He resolved, "I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'" And so, he turned his back on the distant country and began the long, humbling journey home. But this journey did not end in a stern waiting room or a calculated negotiation. While the son was still a long way off, perhaps dusty, ragged, and ashamed, his father saw him. The father hadn't forgotten him. He must have watched the road every single day. The moment he recognized his son, a profound shift occurred. He was filled with compassion, and in an unprecedented display, the wealthy, dignified father ran to his son. He threw his arms around him and kissed him tenderly. The son, overwhelmed, began his rehearsed confession. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father wouldn't let him finish the plea to be a servant. Instead, he instantly called to his servants, issuing immediate and glorious commands. "Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet." These were not just gifts. They were symbols restoring his sonship, his authority, and his status as a free man. Then the father declared, "Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." The sound of music and dancing reached the fields where the elder son was working. When he learned the reason for the lavish party, the return of his reckless brother, he became furiously angry and refused to go in. The compassionate father, having just welcomed his lost son, now went out to plead with his angry, self-righteous one. "Look, father," the elder son protested bitterly, "all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with harlots, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him." The father replied, gently but firmly, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." He acknowledged the elder son's faithfulness and his secure inheritance, but he concluded with the central truth of the story. "But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." The parable ends there, leaving the elder brother's choice whether to join the celebration or remain outside in his resentment as the final poignant question. It stands as a timeless picture of God's unconditional love, which always runs to meet the repentant, and the struggle to embrace that grace.